Hello and welcome to this session where we will be discussing that is Expressionism. In this module, we shall look at the movement which is termed as Expressionism in the history of art and what were the reasons for it to begin, the influences that it took from the previous movements, artists. We shall also see the philosophies that inspired these artists and how Expressionism spread in other forms of art like poetry, architecture, and so on. The work that you see here, The Scream, painted in 1893 by Edward Munch, is considered to be the most important work of Expressionism. In this work, you can feel not only the scream, but you can feel the fear that the person who is screaming is experiencing through the usage of lines and colors that the artist has made in the background. Also, the face of the person screaming is completely white with fear, and you are basically afraid of what he might be looking at, which is not visible directly in the work of art. Expressionism is one of the pioneering art movements which began in the 20th century and especially developed in Germany. It is known to begin with emphasis on the subjective expression and artistic individuality. Expressionism emerged simultaneously in various cities across Germany as a response to a widespread anxiety about humanity's increasing incongruous relationship with the world and lost feelings of faith and spirituality. In the real sense, Expressionism was not a movement like Cubism or Impressionism, where artists came together and worked with same concerns. It is rather a distress that was simultaneously felt by artists, writers, poets, architects, and emerged together in their own medium of expression. It would be an interesting practice to understand why this period is called as Expressionism. If all art is an expression in itself, what different did the artist really do to gain this nomenclature then? Although art is an expression, the artists have not expressed their individual concerns since all times in history. They have expressed beauty, universal emotions, through different narratives, stories, or many times actual historical events. Artists from modern periods like Impressionism, through their use of brush and colors, to their free will, have been painting their impressions of the world and how they saw the world. Expressionism, for the first time, painted the world as they felt it was. Most significantly, Expressionists showed the world that the abstractions could also be very expressive, and the narrative figurative style was not the only way in which one could paint. Free-spirited colors, forms which betrayed the subscribed notions of space and composition, came to be the new visual and laid the foundation for later abstract expressionists which emerged in the 1950s. In a partial way, it is a reaction against Impressionism and academic art. Expressionism was inspired most heavily by the symbolist currents in the late 19th century, like those from Vincent van Gogh, Edward Munch, and James Ensor, which proved particularly influential for the artists working under this nomenclature. These encouraged the distortions of form and the deployment of strong colors to convey a variety of anxieties and the yearnings that were present in then Germany. How did Expressionism really begin? There could be a number of circumstances that brought about the advent of Expressionism. There were a number of artists from Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, philosophies that questioned human emotions against the rationality. The world in this particular time was in an explosive mode with great dissatisfaction at various levels. Let us have a look at the various reasons that led to Expressionism in detail. Expressionism derived from a number of philosophies that developed around the early 20th century. It is one of the movements in art history that has rather evolved more out of thinking than actual physical addressing of a particular pictorial problem. Thus, the art that we see in Expressionism begins to be distorted but still has the lineage of classical, Baroque, Impressionist, and the Post-Impressionist to some extent. What demarcates them from these prior artists is their philosophy, their fear, their attraction to the idea of apocalypse, the search to source of pain and suffering which is highlighted in their subjects. The public could look at growing body of literature and folk art, non-European art, on many sorts of primitive art and the art of children and the insane, all familiarizing readers with the alternatives to classical idealism. Along with the art of past that represented pain, inducement also came from the world of suffering and abnormal sensibility in the books of authors like Dostoevsky, aggressive in manner, and the contents of the plays of Ibsen and Strindberg. And it came especially from the works of Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche's hard, bright vision of the world without God and his negative philosophies. Fyodor Dostoevsky was a Russian novelist, a short story writer, journalist, and a philosopher. He wrote majorly on Christianity. Its message of absolute love, forgiveness, explored through the realm of individual hardships and suffering, bore with passionate love. In his works, he exploited the human psyche, troubled political and social and spiritual atmosphere of the 19th century Russia. His works and his ideas became very popular with the critical thinking groups as he represented the issues that would instigate in their dialogues with ease. Dostoevsky in his works like The Poor Folk written in 1846, Crime and Punishment written in 1866, The Idiot 1869, Demons 1872, and The Brothers Karamazov, which was written in 1880, showcased the life of people who struggled to survive and brought about not just narratives but the inner psychic reactions of his characters. His novels, Notes from Underground, is considered to be one of his first works of existentialist literature that talks about the pain that humans can endure and still exist in this world. Friedrich Nietzsche was the most influential of the philosophers of his times and attracted a great deal of youth with his idea saying God is dead. He put forth a rhetoric that he who was the creator should be the destroyer first and should shatter all values so that the new world would be born. The idea of end of the world, a great tragedy, and apocalypse began developing from his philosophy, which would in turn bring about a more humane world. This idea was very attractive for the avant-garde artist who wanted to make a substantial shift in the way world was functioning. Also, Nietzsche's life too was full of suffering as he had severe myopia and had to cocoon himself indoors, leading a very lonely and subdued life. His philosophy was termed as negative since it spoke of the dark areas of the human mind, spoke of tragedies which would lead to betterment but through very tough times. All these ideas are seen to be reflected in the works of artists in Expressionism. This obviously led to idealizing of artists like Michelangelo, Van Gogh, Gauguin, who led a very miserable life and yet produced the greatest masterpieces of art. The latter two even went mad trying to kill themselves. The ideas of Nietzsche were also very attractive to the people in Germany who believed that their country was losing out on the spiritual content. During the time of beginning of Christianity, where they believed that the Savior would be coming, he would be born amongst them and he would represent the God, and the pain that they were going through was basically because of the bad that they had done. The German philosophers and thinkers also began rebelieving in the idea of faith, that the pain that human beings were going through was because there was an apocalypse about to come. Also, the concept of pure expression developed pertaining to the new awakening towards primitivism and child art. A lot was written about the purity in art of the primitives, who were not bound by the social hypocrisy of the urbane. The same applied to the children. The children were very innocent and were unknown to the complexities of the grown-ups. The insane too here became heroes, as they suffered due to the idiosyncrasies of the society, and they were philosophically at their primal instincts, in pure psychic realm and thus closer to God. In many works of expressionists, we thus find representations of psychical dreams that the artist might be having, almost leading to insane imagery. The insane, as we have seen, are closer to God because God makes them lose all the logic which leads them to pain. An insane person, although might be going through pain but does not have the feeling of pain, since he has completely lost the touch of the feeling. The philosophies thus developed were obviously due to the social developments in Europe as well as Russia. The major reason for such philosophies to develop in Russia was the socialism which was being rampant and affecting the goodwill of people living in these areas. There was also a great awakening to see the art of the East as also the primitives. The fast urbanization in the cities of Britain, France and Germany had brought about a new realization of natural beauty and brought back the ideas of romanticism. The extensive capitalism led to a class distinction and severe competition between the industrialists, politicians and the countries. All these led to a severe social unrest, and only one who was earning well and capable could survive. The humanists thus began questioning the social structure which was no more accommodative for all strata of the society. This was the period just before the First World War, the unrest growing each day. The Russians, the Jew philosophers and the writers were expressing themselves explicitly in Russian socialism model as it had developed severe problems. The government and the higher social order exploiting the lower class. Especially in Germany, there was a serious employment issue and the ideas and individuals like Adolf Hitler had begun to emerge. There also came about an important development in the form of Bauhaus in Germany, a school of design which was influenced by the philosophies of Immanuel Kant, who spoke of pure beauty, of pure expression, which came about only through lines and colors, patterns, and could be experienced by all universally. That experiencing emotions was possible for anyone and was not for an intellectual activity. Development of camera had made straight naturalism a commonplace thing. Art Nouveau had already taken remarkable liberties with normal appearances in order to exploit the expressive capacities of line and form. Why psychologists explain how our affections responded to each element. The fall of government in Germany and the coming of the First World War were actual revelations to the ideas of apocalypse and the change that the philosophers and artists were framing to be happening in sooner future. All these developments were instrumental in what we see today as Expressionism. Expressionism took great influences from artists in much previous to their age, Since, as we have already discussed before, expressionism is something which is inherent to the activity of creation of art. What you see here is a work called Crucifixion at Isenham Altarpiece, painted by Matthias Grunewald during the Northern Renaissance, approximately around 1512 to 1515. The detail of this work will show you the gruesome face of Christ, who is going through extreme physical pain although being a god. His lips are completely jarred and have turned white by severe pain and loss of blood. If you have a look at the detail of his feet, you can see the nail which has been jammed through his bones, and his legs and nerves have become completely lifeless. Expressionists greatly admired such works of art. They realized the power of colors and shapes, of brushstrokes and textures, of size and scale. They realized that the usage of all these fundamental elements of art was not sufficient and subject could not be abandoned completely. This awareness was beginning to be increasingly popular around the 19th century as artists assumed the power of music, which could directly affect without any descriptions or narratives. Being extremely fascinated by works of artists like Grunewald, the expressionists realized the power of colors and shapes, of brushstrokes and textures, of size and scale, and believed that it was sufficient and that subject could now be abandoned completely. This awareness was beginning to be increasingly popular around the 19th century as artists assumed the power of music, which could directly affect without any descriptions or narrations. The artists who were questioning the mechanical reflexes of the Impressionist color strokes now looked more towards the free-spirited Romantics. The Romantics also led to a growing awareness provoked by nationalism of freedom enjoyed by other than academic artists from the previous centuries. The German artists thus began looking back at the German Renaissance and realized the expressionist qualities in the art of Dürer, Aldorfer, Bosch, and especially Grunewald. The art of these artists also had an apocalyptic anxiety in their works that appealed to the artists of this century due to their contemporary situations. Grunewald, the painter of extreme suffering of Christ at Isenham, inspired great admiration and direct imitation. The book published in Munich in 1918, The Expressionist Miniatures of the German Middle Ages, enhanced the period between 8 to 15 centuries as example to the modern expressionist. You can see in the work called as a suffering man, which is detail of the temptation of Saint Anthony, painted by Grunewald in 1515, where he has shown this person going through extreme physical pain, but ultimately to achieve divinity, to reach God. Pain or apocalypse thus was a medium to reach or to begin a new world and not really a tragedy. The artists were now looking into more of artists who defied classical idealism of the Italian Renaissance, artists who were not making art that was only meant to please, but rather art that was the reflection of certain personal or social elements. The Venetian tradition of dramatic lighting, rich colors, and personal, sometimes impassioned brushstrokes was to some extent expressionist. From derived painters like El Greco and Rembrandt, who were the most admired inspirations for the expressionist. Thus, even Michelangelo at some time inspired the expressionist, where his personal urgency led to vigor and distortion. Baroque art was majorly concerned with the audience reaction and the subjects, which were patron-oriented or church commissions. Another individual artist who greatly inspired the expressionist was Peter Paul Rubens. The openly emotional qualities of Rubens' art made him an ideal model for successors unwilling to adopt the cooler disciplines of classicism, and thus not long after his death, he had become a champion of modernism and self-reliance. Rubens was able to portray in the known subjects a great individual emotion, the pain, the suffering, and the coming of apocalypse that attracted the expressionist artist. This can be seen evidently in the works like Head of Medusa, painted in 1617, and The Detail of Last Judgment, painted in 1620, where a very common Renaissance period subject or a very common subject of post-Renaissance has been painted very dramatically by Rubens. Expressionism was also the age of great individual awakening, and thus Rembrandt too became very important for the artist for their self-expression. Rembrandt, who is most popularly known for his self-portraits, which are almost a pictorial history of his living, became very significant for expressionists who also extensively painted their self-portraits. For example, if you have a look at this particular work, which is one of his self-portraits, he is seen coyly smiling, creating mystery around him. Rembrandt's use of color, chiaroscuro and brush, of line and contrast or subject even was extremely subjective. As his fame increased around 1800, knowledge of his career and life made artists to represent him as the original modern outsider, the genius rejected by the society because he worked largely against them. The 18th century age of enlightenment values above all the individualism, but it reversed in Romanticism, which rather championed the introspection, to some extent questioning of the social that swept through all art. Artists like Francisco Goya, William Blake, Delacroix, Friedrich were outstanding contributors to the idea of artistic creation rooted in the unconscious personal and superpersonal forces, which made the artist mere medium to express the sublime, the universal truth. The renewed romanticism of the later 19th century became the immediate basis of modern expressionism, with artists like Paul Gauguin, who rejected the European civilization and celebrated alternative existence in emotional form and color. Ensor's sudden shift from fine painting to intentionally shocking technique and subjects, Munch's use of hallucinatory images giving public form to his private miseries, Van Gogh's passionate yet controlled deformation of nature and intensified natural color. These were immediate models for the 20th century painters seeking expressive means. The life of these painters too was very significant, as they all suffered and yet rejected the social order to live their lives as they wanted to and paint their works as they wished to be painted. With all these artists and artworks idealized, like the Starry Night by Van Gogh, painted in 1889, or the Yellow Christ, which was the epitome of Expressionism, painted by Paul Gauguin again in 1889, the Expressionists began working, portraying their fears, their personal anxieties. The personal life of the artist now became very significant. The artist rejected the contemporary ideas of beauty and pleasure, rejecting the social established notions began to be a fashion. The expressionism that we thus see today was an idea that emerged out of a number of influences and inspirations. The art that we see is thus not alarmingly different in visuals. The artists were interested in more of conceptual changes than the modes of compositions. They concentrated less on the technique and more on the desired effect, which could be true to themselves than to the audience. This ism developed majorly in Germany and included artists like Munch, Nold, Kokoschka, Kirchner, Kandinsky, Mark, and many more. Expressionism can be said as the most psychologically liberating movement for the artist. But as mentioned before, all art is an expression, and thus expressionism never ceased to exist. Every period has its own set of expressionists.